I tell you, there's this guy. He's I don't know, he's maddening is what he is. It's just constantly maddening. So I'll get into that obviously as I progress through this video, but it specifically has to deal with these solar panels. So as you know, Carolyn bought this shed. She put the shed together by herself. Now, for those who complained that I don't do anything around here, I was more than happy to put it together, but she wanted to do it. This was her project. This is something she wanted to do. She actually wanted to build the floor, but I kind of stole that from her. I went out and bought the materials and I had it together before she, so I don't know if she was that disappointed that I did it, but I went ahead and did it. But she wants to get rid of this old camper, and it's on its last leg. And for those who complain, oh, you should have done it, built it right, we built it this way so we could travel around the country, and it took us all the way from the west coast to the east coast and up north, and it did a fantastic job. It served its purpose, and now it just sits here and I haven't maintained it. People think that I should have built it better. I was really trying to go for lightweight. I wasn't looking for longevity, just a few years, and it did its job quite well. I would imagine if we were still traveling, we would probably already upgraded to something different. So I would imagine what we would have gotten was a single axle trailer. But it did its job and it protected us very well. We set it on the ground here. We built a tiny house. We were living in it, put a heat exchanger in it. Now it just houses our batteries and charge controller and inverter. So as you know, I gotta get that moved, and I'm gonna explain what we've done here, so bear with me. So we had the solar panels down here, right here. That's kind of where we set them up when we got started. It was close to the camper, so we could keep the wire short because there's so many amps. Amps equate to distance. So when you have a 12 volt system like I do, now a lot of people will say, oh no, you need a 24 volt or an 80 volt. I do 12 volt because one, I understand 12 volt very well. Don't need to re-educate myself on anything, and it's easy to buy things. 12 volt inverter, 12 volt charge controller, 12 volt batteries. Now you can link up your batteries to make them 48, and you can link up your solar panels to make them 48 or 24 or whatever you're wanting to make. But that's just more complication I don't need in my life. So we moved them up the hill because she wanted to get this shed built. I can't remember why she wanted me to move the solar panels. Now we're thinking of it. Can't remember, but regardless, she wanted to get those moved up. But that means we got to get rid of the camper, because as soon as the sun starts going back down, the camper will block the solar panels. So we got to get it down in a pretty big hurry. No later than July, the end of July. We got it moved up here. Well, then I put it on a tarp, which was something I wish I would have done down here. But like I said, when we got here, we had a lot of stuff to do. We had to install the well pump, had to get the bottom portion. I built a bottom portion to the camper. We had to get the solar panels hooked up, and there was just a lot to do really quick. We ran the generator for 3 days because we didn't have electric. So I've set them here, and it was not a bad idea. Now, I originally built a frame for them, but I realized keeping them on the ground, they stay cooler. You gain efficiencies by keeping them cooler. Anything over 78 degrees, you start to lose voltage. And I've explained all that before. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, maybe just Google it. It might be easier to understand than me trying to explain to it. But as it gets hotter, the voltage drops. And so when you're running lead acid batteries, you have to get your voltage up to 14, well, probably about 16 volts. So your solar panels have to get up to 16 volts. Well, if it's too hot, you may not get enough volts to actually charge your battery. So I'll keep them on the ground, and to stay cooler, I noticed I have one of those laser, and I did an experiment. As a matter of fact, if you want to see what I've done over the last couple of weeks, you can just go back maybe the last month and watch all these videos. Well, when I got it up here, I discovered I could run the well pump. Now, the well pump is massive. It's 800 watts. At the time, I had 1,000 watts of solar panels. Now, I knew I was losing efficiencies on the solar panels. This one, the main glass is busted up on. It rolled over onto a rock and busted it from a windstorm. So we got them up here, got them on a tarp so I can work on it quite easily. And I tested every one of them when I hooked it up. Roll them all over on their upside down, and I checked each one individually. So once I was producing a massive amount of it, electricity from them, which I wasn't down here because the wires would get twisted up in the grass and different things. We started running the well pump, and then I realized that one charge controller isn't enough. Gotta have two. First of all, I discovered that my charge controller was only 40 amps. I thought it was 60 amps. A little bit of confusion. The instructions were in Chinese, translated to English type of thing. And so I wasn't aware that when I bought the inverter, it said 60 amps, but that was for a 24 volt system. I have a 12 volt system. And if you read closely enough, through all the translation misinterpretation stuff, when you run 12 volts, it only produces 40 amps. Well, I didn't discover that until I moved them up here running that well pump. So initially I went ahead and bought 2 new solar panels. And then I discovered, oh, 40 amps, that's it. So I went ahead and bought another charge controller also. The solar panels didn't make a huge difference. Made a difference, but not huge. It was the charge controller that made a huge difference. So now I have 2 systems running into one battery bank. I got 6 solar panels running into one charge controller. The other 6 panels run into the other charge controller, and both of them run into 8 batteries total. My batteries are charging by 11 o'clock now. The sun doesn't even hit these panels down here until 9:30. So in an hour and a half, my batteries are charged from overnight use running that freezer. These 2 up here, I got them where I can move them around, and I do. I move them throughout the day. These are getting electricity by 8 o'clock. Why the charge controller made such a big difference is my charge controller believes I have a 100 amp battery, when actually I have 800 amps of batteries. When you are charging a battery, you're only supposed to charge it to 25% of its capacity. So a 100 amp battery, you can only put 25 amps into. It's 25 amps an hour. Well, when I have 800 amps, I can do 8 times that amount. So what is that, 200 amps I could put into it? Well, my panels are making 60 amps total, all 12 of them. But when I shut off the well pump, the charge controller dropped down to 25 amps because I believed it had one battery. But when I did 2 charge controllers, it's allowed one battery charger to go to 25 amps and the other battery charger to go to 25 amps, making a total of 50 amps going into my batteries. So I have 60, so I could do a little better, but I don't need to. It's not that big of a deal. But the 60 amps is good. When I turn on the well pump, I use all 60 at that point. But I haven't done that. I start the well pump about 9:30 and the sun is still kind of at a high angle to the solar panels. So I'm only getting about 48 amps. But like I said, by 11:30, batteries are charged and it has been wonderful. Yesterday, it was a pretty cloudy day, thunderstorms all day. And we got bursts of sun, maybe for 15 minutes and then it would stop. And those bursts of suns throughout the cloudy day, these panels charged the batteries almost all the way. So all I had to do was run the generator for an hour last night. That was a huge difference than what I used to have to do. I used to have to run it for about 4 hours. Now we've talked about we might get more batteries, probably will get more batteries within the next month or 2. If I get more solar panels, I will have to get another charge controller, but that would only be for cloudy days. I really have enough when it's sunny now. We've talked about maybe getting a little coffee pot and turning off the burner, just clipping the wire so the burner doesn't turn on. Instead of using a percolator, we might be able to use a coffee pot. We got a couple in the camper. When we bought the camper, there was a couple that came with it. So now all I got to do is get the batteries and all the equipment, the electrical equipment, into that shed. And people are telling me, when are you going to get that done? Everybody's in a hurry. But the problem is I got to make sure that I have everything I need before I start this project, because I won't have any electric. I will have to run off the generator. I'll get that big generator, the 2500 watt generator. I won't run it off propane, I'll run it off gasoline. It will have to stay running until I get that completed. The problem is if I don't get it done fast enough, I may even have to run it throughout the night. I mean, it's not a huge issue, but imagine if I run into a problem and I don't have something I need and I got to run the generator for days on end. I'm really not one to spend that much gas, so I don't want to spend no more than a day switching these batteries over. That'll be 24 hours on the generator. Now I'm going to run the generator, not this little one. This little one can't handle both the camper, Carolyn's son's camper, and our house. So I'll get the big one down here, and it runs about 11 hours on a gallon of gas at 25% usage. So I'll probably have to fill it twice, maybe if I have to run it overnight. but I'm going to run it off gasoline because it runs at a lower RPM and produces more power off gasoline. It's a propane dual fuel generators, gasoline and propane. So I'll run it off gasoline. And then when I'm done running and we get gasoline, I'll drain all the gas out of it, put it back on propane. Because when we run the well off the generator, I run propane because it just sits there so long now that if you got gasoline, it probably would go bad. You're not supposed to leave gasoline in that generator for more than 2 weeks. And I've learned my lesson. I already ruined one carburetor from it. All I got to do now is attach the battery. So I've cut a bunch of wires. I'm going to show you these wires. That way the wire will go from positive, 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 negative, negative, negative from the batteries. So positive to one battery to positive to another battery, all 8 in a row. We got some walnuts dropping already. They're a little small, but we're already getting them. So I don't know if these are usable yet. They're dropping pretty early this year. I don't know if that's because we're not getting any rain. So I cut a bunch of these wires, and what I used was 12 gauge wire, house wire. I've got a bunch of it laying around. Now people will tell me you need stranded wire for DC. Well, maybe, but you Google it, people say it doesn't make a big difference. So I have a bunch of this 12 gauge laying around. So it's 12-2 with ground. So it's 3 strands of wire in there, negative, positive, and ground. And so I've twisted all 3 of those wires together. That gives me a 7 gauge wire. So it went from 12 gauge down to 7, which when the well starts up, when the well starts up, you actually use probably double or more electricity than what the well is capable of. So it's 800 watts. So when it starts up, it's 1600 watts just for a brief second. Well, in order to do that, I really need 8 gauge wire to connect the batteries with. So this is 7. Now you can Google that, and there's a little calculator on Google. You just plug your numbers in. You know, 3 wires, it will ask you how many wires, 3. What gauge, 12, and then it calculates and says 7 gauge. I want to make sure that the connections are done properly. So I ordered these. And these are little things I can put on the battery. The battery has not only a battery post that you can put a battery cable on, but it has a nut and bolt on it. Also, you can slide that on the bolt and tighten the nut around it. So I bought these. These were pretty cheap, $6 a package. And I bought way more than I needed because I wanted to make sure I have enough to do anything I want with later, and I have them available. So this wasn't too hard. So all I had to do really was trim up the wire so that will fit on there properly because I made them too long. So they fit on there pretty well. And then I got to smash that. So there's 3 things I guess I'm doing really that I've done to smash it to make sure it's got a good connection. First thing I got this little tool. It's a one-purpose tool. This tightens a specific type of hose clamp that you have to use on your well pipe. That black pipe you have to use. Well, in order to connect that, you have to buy these rings. And this thing catches a little knob there, and you squeeze that ring using this. And I hated buying this. I made the video and said, yeah, this is a one-purpose tool. I hate it. Because around here, we don't have a lot of room to store tools. But I can use it for clamping this down. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that, but I've clamped it twice. And that way I make sure that I get a good solid connection between the wire and whatever this is called. And then what I did was I put it on a piece of concrete and then I just smashed it flat. So you can see, I don't know if you can see that, but like I said, I've got 2 lines going in there from that tool, and then I smashed it flat with a hammer. That way the whole thing is touching those 3 strands of wire. And I did both ends. So I got one of my batteries. Now somebody told me I need to get a thread cleaner. Well, yeah, that's just another tool I got to buy. So it's what I'm going to do is one of the batteries has a strip bolt on it. So I'm just going to use one of my alligator clamps that I got from an old battery charger. I'm going to use that instead of doing it with this. That way I don't have to replace that battery or go out and buy specialized tools. So I know that I'm probably getting pretty annoying and frustrating talking about solar panels so much, but the project is almost over. And this is what it takes. You don't rush these things. You want to make sure you got everything done properly, because when I rushed it the first time, I never made enough electricity. You know, people complain that I'm not making all the electricity I can. I'm not being very efficient. But then when I do it properly, they're like, hurry up, get done with it. It's just slow go. So if you'll click this up next box, take you a video where I'm showing you a new toy that I got from my dad. So if I can inspire you, take your time. so you can live your dreams. Thanks for watching.